Okay, so I guess we'll begin. Um, Welcome everyone to today's webinar talk, When Women Rebel, Confronting Charismatic Authority in Nigeria by Ebenezer Obadare. Um, this talk is hosted by Columbia University's Institute for Religion, Culture, and Public Life. And I am Catherine Ewing, Professor of Religion and Director of the South Asia Institute. The lecture is part of the Rethinking Public Religion in Africa and South Asia project at IRCPL in collaboration with the Institute for African Studies and the South Asia Institute. IRCPL Director Matthew Engelke and I are co-PIs on this project that has allowed us to bring speakers like Professor Obadari here. And the project is funded by the Henry Luce Foundation. So with that, I am delighted to introduce our speaker, Ebenezer Obadari, who is Professor of Sociology at the University of Kansas. He did his PhD at the London School of Economics and has published extensively on religion and politics, civic engagement, and civic service and citizenship in Africa. His numerous books, remarkable number of books, include, to name just some of the more recent ones, Humor, Silence, and Civil Society in Nigeria in 2016, Governance and the Crisis of Rule in Contemporary Africa, Leadership and Transformation, also in 2016, The Handbook of Civil Society in Africa in 2014, and Civic Agency in Africa, Arts of Resistance in the 21st Century in 2014. His ongoing research focuses on Pentecostal pastors, power, and politics in Africa. In his 2018 book, Pentecostal Republic, Religion and the Struggle for State Power in Nigeria, he argues that in Nigeria, the ascendance of Pentecostalism is closely intertwined with politics and has created a theocratic class that exercises a powerful influence over Nigerian political life. I anticipate that today's talk will take these themes in a new direction. I hope so, and I'm looking forward to talking with you about this. I do want to mention that everybody's kind of blanked out now, but for the Q&A, you will have the opportunity to turn on your video, so it will be more like a conversation. I think we've decided that it's best if we can all see each other if possible. And so with that, we all virtually welcome you to Columbia, however silent we may seem to be behind our blank cameras. And with that, I'll blank myself out and leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the very warm introduction. Can I share my screen?
I assume you can. Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here. So the title of my lecture this evening, as you just mentioned, is Why Women Rebel: Challenging Charismatic Authority in Nigeria. So in this lecture, I draw on material from a chapter in my forthcoming book on Pentecostal pastors in Nigeria. The title of the forthcoming book is Clerical State, Pastors, Politics, Gender, and Sexuality in Nigeria. And the book will be published by the University of Notre Dame Press. Now, to give you a proper appreciation of the overall sociological context for this lecture, and particularly about the women at the center of it, and the power dynamic between them and the influential male pastors they stood up to, it is important that you understand what Clerical State, the forthcoming book, is all about. So allow me to do a quick introduction. The analysis in Clerical State pivots on three basic questions. Number one, how is it that the pastor in contemporary Nigeria, and indeed in other African countries where Pentecostal Christianity exercises an outsized influence, has come to occupy such a central place in the social imaginary, to such an extent that other forms of professional judgment must defer to him? Second question, what becomes of institutions within state and civil society when a large number of of people within a community put their faith in the figure of the pastor? And then lastly, what specific transformations in social trust, state-society relations, politics, the economy, legitimacy, and authority are evoked by the recent ascendance and continued visibility of the contemporary Pentecostal pastor in Nigeria? So in response to these three questions, Clerical State, the book, advances two arguments as follows. One, I suggest that the emergence of the contemporary Pentecostal pastor on the social scene in many African countries reflects a fundamental rupture and realignment in the basis, formation, and mobilization of authority in these societies. Insofar as the contemporary Pentecostal pastor has become an existential micromanager, a blend of spiritual guide, political consultant, statesman without portfolio, financial coach, prophet, general overseer, marriage counselor, matchmaker, social influencer, peddler of aphrodisiacs, author, fashion icon, playboy, travel advisor, all-purpose celebrity, and last but not least, a hypermasculine object of erotic fascination. It is, so I claim, because conventional poles of authority have waned, opening up a crack in the social fabric that the figure of the pastor has happily stepped into. Clerical State is my attempt to trace the historical sociology of this process of decomposition and reconfiguring of authority. The second argument in the book is that the pastor's newfangled authority is the outcome of Pentecostalism's inundation of politics, economic life, and cultural production in much of Africa. Accordingly, while Clerical State is on the one hand a critical examination of how pastors have annexed considerable social power, effectively establishing what I call an aristocracy of wonderment. On the other hand, my book is an analysis of the social crucible in which this annexation has taken place. So for precisely this reason, the interest in the book is not just in political authority, but given the contention that the pastor's influence spills over across a variety of social domains, authority in a much more capacious sense. Now, I should point out that Clerical State is the second installment of an anticipated trilogy on the dynamic interaction of faith and politics in the Nigerian Fourth Republic. And the analysis in the book builds on arguments advanced in the first installment, Pentecostal Republic, religion and the struggle for state power in Nigeria. If Pentecostal Republic advances that Pentecostalism is the lodestar of the Nigerian Fourth Republic and a vehicle for the transformation of the historical dynamic between theological agents and holders of political power, Clerical State argues that Pentecostalism itself cannot be understood without an understanding of the agency of pastors. Now, I've described the contemporary Nigerian pastor as an existential micromanager, but for the sake of any one of you out there who may still be wondering what it really means to be that subject or that figure, let me share an anecdote that hopefully captures what I'm trying to convey. So several years ago, on a trip from London to Lagos, I happened on a scene at Heathrow International Airport. As I made my way across the terminal, I saw a long line of people that from their dressing, I knew right away were my fellow Nigerians. The line seemed rather long, and more people, evidently certain of what they will encounter at the front end, kept joining to make it, longer. So I decided to take a look and soon discovered the reason why a line at the airport did not lead to the check-in counter, which did not lead to the check-in counter, has suddenly become the one to join. The person at the front end of the line was none other than Pastor Enoch Adeboye, General Overseer of the Redeemed Christian Church of God. And on this evening, and this was well before his church determined that a private jet will suit him better and bought him one, he was about to catch a flight to Lagos, only to be ambushed by people who wanted to take advantage of a rare closeness to his person to ask for his blessings. Popularly known as Daddy Gio, Pastor Adeboye, suffice to say, is not just an ordinary pastor, but one considered by many in his congregation to be both a prophet whose pronouncements are accurate because they are revealed to him by God, and a mediator who is especially qualified to intercede to God on their behalf because of his close relationship with God. He is the one who, if he sneezed, his church members will catch a cold. And his body, imagined to be suffused with what they call the power of anointing, is treated with a reverence bordering on beatification. One could therefore understand the importance of the moment for the church members who had suddenly found themselves in his immediate proximity, minus the retinue of minders and bodyguards that ordinarily would have bad access to him. The management of access being a central principle of the pastoral elite mistake. I stood there for a while, gawking as each individual genuflected, received a word of blessing, and quickly yielded to the person behind. And for a brief moment, I assure you, I wanted nothing more than to become a pastor myself. Though, to be honest, I would rather settle for being treated like one. So whenever I think about the attraction of pastoring in contemporary Nigeria, my mind always goes back to that intro cameo. What is it like to be Daddy Gio, or just a regular Gio, fawned over by millions and treated like a royalty wherever you go? What is it like to be above the law, to live in what I call a state of ecclesiastic exception, and not just metaphorically, as can be illustrated with numerous examples from contemporary Nigeria? Granted, not every pastor is as famous or as revered as Pastor Adeboye. And as I make clear in Clerical State, the book, pastors indeed come in various stripes. Nevertheless, the point is that the reverence accorded Pastor Adeboye is not atypical. And this is arguably the greatest draw of pastoring in Nigeria. And another draw, since we're on the subject, is the opportunity that pastoring affords for social becoming, meaning that for the average young person otherwise unable to access unemployment, and therefore unable to discharge normative socio-cultural and filial obligations due to the prolonged crunch in the formal labor market, pastoring, requiring, it must be noted, little by way of seed investment, becomes an attractive option. To appreciate this point, it is important to keep in mind the reality that for the average young Nigerian, the menu of social opportunity tends to be limited to a handful of options: travel abroad, join politics, whether as an office seeker or part of the entourage of an office holder, take up a life of crime, the scope for which has been suddenly expanded by digitization, or become a pastor. Of all these options, not only does pastoring possess at least the advantage of being mostly legal, the emphasis is on mostly, with a degree of buffer against the economic vagaries, it also, most important, allows the young entrepreneur a broad attitude in terms of self-curation. For young people facing the danger of permanent consignment to the social margins, pastoring can be the last opportunity to, as Nigerians say, become somebody. Third and finally, being a pastor seems the quickest route to the social privileges and social legitimacy ordinarily accruing to other professions, lawyer, doctor, professor, whatever, but without any of their ethical strictures or training requirements. Compared with the material dividends from training to be a lawyer, for instance, which can be uncertain, pastoring promises instant material rewards, a degree of social respect that the ordinary professional can only dream of, and connections to the political and business elite at national and transnational levels. In a credential-conscious society like Nigeria, being a pastor may well be the ultimate credential. Because of the enormous social power of pastors, it comes as no surprise that many of them feel entitled to the bodies of women. As a matter of fact, for some, unconstrained access to women's bodies is seen as evidence that they have, in the Nigerian parlance, arrived. But the interaction is far from unidirectional. There's abundant evidence to show that women, for reasons having to do with money, access, and prestige, also develop functional relationships with pastors. More troublingly, and as we shall see presently, the most fervent defenders of male pastors accused of sexual malfeasances against women are often other women. As ever, women's agency is not a simple matter. And I'm going to say more about this in short order. So I've provided this background information on the place of pastoring in the Nigerian social imaginary in order to convey a sense of the odds faced by the four women at the heart of this lecture, and to give you a framework for understanding why the encounters between the women and the respective pastors assumed the patterns they ultimately did. Given the powerful shadow cast by the most influential pastors in contemporary Nigeria, only a brave woman, or perhaps a useless one, would do what this woman did. I know you must be wondering, useless woman? Now, once you've spent a fair amount of time in Nigeria or around Nigerians, it's an epithet your hairs are bound to pick. It's mostly used by men, though most women themselves are not above using it. The context can vary. Though you typically hear it in a conversation among a group of men ventilating their annoyance about a particular woman, whether a wife, a girlfriend, even a female boss, whether followed by a question mark, as in that useless woman, or an exclamatory one, as in that useless woman. The same meaning seems to be conveyed. The woman in question has apparently disappointed the speaker of the words through her refusal to conform to a particular normative standard, often a standard set arbitrarily by men. When a man uses it to describe his spouse, it usually means that the said spouse or wife has either refused to submit to him or fallen afoul in some unspecified manner of a gender-specific behavioral standard, hence undeserving of the grace and protection of her husband. A useless woman at the same time could be a woman who, in a position of authority, has behaved exactly like a regular male boss would, thus falling short of the expectation that, being female, she should indeed have acted differently. A useless girlfriend is often one who has strayed from the unwritten rules governing relations between an older male aristo. It's a shortened form of, aristocrat in Nigeria. And I can say more about this for those who want to, who may be interested. And his younger female consort, and perhaps has declared independence by offering her sexual favors to another man. A useless woman, in short, is a woman who acts in contravention of the norm underpinning gender and social relations. And it is usually, though not exclusively in that sense, that women too use it when describing or remonstrating with another woman. She, that is the useless woman, is the one who consciously or otherwise exposes both the articulated and inarticulable paradigms and presuppositions regarding female conduct, especially in relation to a male figure or male spaces, whether in a domestic or in a public setting. She's the one who breaks ranks, the socially insolent who, having refused to act in conformity to her expected role, is thus deserving of male-determined, if at times female-enforced penalty. The Nigerian useless woman, to invoke Sarah Ahmed, is a killjoy, the one with no use, but whose uselessness inadvertently points to the male-favoring privileges and contradictions inherent in gender relations. And just in case you're wondering, there are useless men. Useless men are men who, contrariwise, fail to meet the general understanding of what a man should be, and crucially, how a man should comport himself in relation to women. A man who cannot provide for his family, and in doing so put a woman in her place, in both senses of the term, is considered useless, not just by his fellow men, but by women, for they too have their own expectations regarding how men should function. In any event, the encounters involving these four useless women often prove that resistance to the power of the pastor can often come from the most unexpected places, unleashing social dramas that help amplify the contours of the milieu in which pastoral power has become ascendant. And I'm suggesting that the manner in which the encounters were resolved is an object lesson, first in the power of the pastor and the durability of the structures that underpin and enable it. Second, it is a warning against the common tendency to flatten women's agency by disregarding real and consequential differences among them. While, as I illustrate presently, women often face similar political and cultural challenges, the way in which they combat or push back against such challenges, and therefore their success or failure in doing so, may vary depending on their education, their social status, their marital status, their shrewdness with media, including social media and other personal properties. So I'm now going to talk about, the first of those four, encounters involving, different women, and influential male pastors. So there are two things that I could not establish about, the incident I'm about to narrate, no matter how hard I tried. So the first is the date it took place. And the second is the name of the young woman at the center of it. So while the first is not material, because the video is on YouTube and I'm going to show you the video, presently, the anonymity of the young woman is directly relevant to my argument about the cultural capital of women facing social odds. It seems to me that the main reason why I could not find the young woman's name anywhere, not even in the suit filed on her behalf, as I explained below, and the reason why nobody in the media thought it worthwhile to find out is that she's, socially speaking, a non-entity, and she would not have been in the news in the first instance, but for the fact that she was resolute enough to stand up to a famous man of God. The subject of the video itself, a deliverance session to cast out demons and familiar spirits, is really unremarkable as far as Nigerian Pentecostalism is concerned. And when we see Bishop Oyedepo, General Overseer of Living Faith Tabernacle, which is also known as Winners Chapel, looking deeper in his all-white suit, we know that he's about to do something he has done countless times. What we are not prepared for is the roadblock he would soon run into in the form of open rebellion from one of the possessed young women and men kneeling in front of the altar waiting to be exorcised. Mariana, can you please play the video?
Broken in the name of Jesus. You've been there for how long?
I'm not a witch. I'm a witch for Jesus.
No what?
My own witch is for Jesus. I don't use
You are a foul devil. Do you know who you are talking to? Foul devil. Where are you from?
I'm from Imo State.
Where did you come from?
I'm not a witch,
Who are you?
but I'm witch for Jesus.
Jesus has no witches. You are a devil. You are not set for deliverance, and you are free to go to hell. Where did you get in there?
I'm not a witch, but I used to dream that I was with them.
Every one of you that is on this front that speaks a lie, you are cut down. Cut down. Where are you from? Where did you get?
I used to always think about sexual things.
Father, in the name of Jesus.
Thank you, Mariana. I think I can have the one. Okay. Do you have the screen back? Can you? Am I good?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So the encounter you've just watched drew public attention and dominated the Nigerian news cycle for a spell. As a matter of fact, such was the anger felt by a cross-section of Nigerians at the young woman's casual abuse by Pastor Oyedepo that one Robert Ebenezer, a Lagos-based lawyer, filed a suit in which she is referred to as Miss Justice on her behalf in a Nigerian high court. In condemning Bishop Oyedepo, and perhaps rightly so, most of the social and academic commentary on the incident has emphasized the young woman's victimization, originating, it is widely assumed, in the fact of her gender. In this reading, Miss Justice would not have been on the receiving end of that slap had she been a boy. Gender, of course, is not irrelevant here. After all, majority of Pentecostal pastors are men, while correspondingly, majority of individuals who continue to face witchcraft and demonic possession accusations are overwhelmingly women, sometimes little girls, as you've seen. As a matter of fact, and to buttress the point about gender, many of the abuses and injuries typically inflicted on such individuals in the course of such exorcism including sexual abuse, seem by their nature gendered. Yet, important as the emphasis on gender is, in this example, we cannot in this example see it in isolation from seniority and class. The reason that Miss Justice could be so casually maltreated is that she is, in addition to being a woman, of lower socioeconomic status. Neither can be separated in this case. More important, to portray her entirely as a victim is to miss the crucial point that for a brief moment, she had mounted a resistance, the ramifications of which, in all probability, she could not have calculated. Perhaps she had freely and happily consented to being paraded at the altar and prayed for. We will never know. What comes across clearly is her insistence that she is not a witch, meaning she's not a witch, but that even if she is, she's a witch for Jesus. As I've argued elsewhere, one thing that the civil society literature in Africa and beyond continues to overlook, owing to the obsession with former civil society organizations, CSO, is the sheer power of unplanned and insurrectionary movements, such as the one I'm describing here, and the continued possibility for such openings despite the risks. Miss Justice was violated quite all right. I do not dispute that. Shabbily clad, she was no match for the grandeur and sartorial elegance of Bishop Oyedepo. She was also on her knees, the perfect posture of submission. And here I'm drawing on, the work of, Elias Canetti. The perfect posture of submission, or since George Floyd, affirmation or defiance. Yet, in a momentary but powerful show of insubordination, she had refused to adhere to the script and may have even flipped it, and not even a slap from the frustrated Oyedepo, suddenly in unfamiliar territory, would change her mind. The success of our rebellion could be seen not just in the fact that Oyedepo, threatening, "You are not set for deliverance and you are free to go to hell," decided to walk away, but also in the fact that the next woman, as you just saw, felt sufficiently emboldened to start by saying, "I am not a witch." Of what he has called hidden transcripts and the often fugitive political conduct of subordinate groups, James Scott has remarked, I'm talking about the anthropology James Scott, the first public declaration of the hidden transcript then as a prehistory that explains its capacity to produce political breakthroughs. If, of course, the first act of defiance meets with a decisive defeat, it is unlikely to be emulated by others. The courage of those who fail, however, is likely to be noted, admired, and even mythologized in stories of bravery, social banditry, and noble sacrifice. They become themselves part of the hidden transcript. To be clear, there wasn't much hidden in the revolt of Miss Justice. It was an open auditorium, and she was mutinying in plain sight. And it would be a stretch to describe the public reaction to our rebellion, passionate though it was, as a political breakthrough. Still, there's no doubting the impact of our open defiance. In the first place, it did generate a serious debate among a cross-section of Nigerians on the power of Pentecostal pastors like Bishop Oyedepo. And while such debates often come with a risk of degenerating into a shouting match, as I once argued regarding the controversy over homosexuality in Nigeria, sometimes their real value is symbolic. That is, the simple fact that people feel agitated or concerned enough to want to talk. Second, we can imagine the effect the incident must have had on Bishop Oyedepo himself, as several months later, with Miss Justice not there to dispute his account, Oyedepo will boast to his audience that "I slapped a witch here last year. She came back in February to apologize. She begged me to please forgive her." Now, since there's no way of confirming that Miss Justice did indeed visit Oyedepo to atone for her insubordination, we have to take the pastor's word for it. In any case, and as we shall see in the other encounters, entreaties like the one alleged by Bishop Oyedepo are not uncommon, but are in fact a key aspect of the degradation process through which useless women are disciplined and re-educated into their social roles as subordinates, either to men or to the system, often the same thing in many cases. The aim of such degradation ceremonies, consistent with sociological insights on the subject, and I'm going to say more about degradation ceremonies in short order, and I'm drawing here on the work of the sociologist Harold Garfinkel, And I'm also using the, some of the writings of my, my friend and colleague, Professor Robert Antonio, on this matter. So the aim of such degradation ceremonies, which is consistent with sociological insight of the subject, is to assert the supremacy of the authoritative figure, in this case, the pastor, by humiliating and lowering the status of the offender, that is misjustice. We really don't know if misjustice was brought in for re-education, but the unprovoked allusion to it is strong enough confirmation that pastoral prestige was besmirched. The wench or misjustice had made a mark. So here's the second case involving, Miss Stephanie Otobo and Pastor Johnson Sulaiman. So early in 2017, Miss Stephanie Otobo, a Canada-based Nigerian-born singer-songwriter, became a cause celebre after she came out to accuse Apostle Johnson Sulaiman of the Omega Fire Ministries worldwide of, among other things, going back on a firm promise to take her to the altar. As accusations trailed counter-accusations in a protracted and mutually unedifying media spectacle, the only thing that a neutral party could establish was that Miss Otobo and Pastor Suleiman were no strangers to each other and had been acquaintances in some capacity since their first meeting in Canada in 2015. From all indications, Miss Otobo had become embittered after discovering, much to her chagrin, that the man of God with whom she was looking forward to a future filled with marital bliss, whom she had gone out of her way to satisfy amorously, and who had once put her in the family way, was in fact married with children. So to prove that she was not lying, Miss Otobo had released Snapchat pictures of herself and Pastor Suleiman in compromising situations. In February 2017, Miss Otobo escalated her attacks on Pastor Suleiman by filing a formal petition through a lawyer, Festus Kayamo, asking the police to investigate the allegations she had made against Pastor Suleiman, including the fact that he had induced her to abort a pregnancy and had reneged on the promise to buy her real estate if she agreed to relocate to Nigeria from Canada. In a letter of 3rd March 2017 to the Inspector General of Police, Ms. Otobo asked for 500 million naira in damages, which the pastor had 7 days to make good. Pastor Sulaiman promptly retaliated with a defamation countersuit. The Otobo-Sulaiman saga has all the elements of your normal sex scandal, but sex is just one of the reasons why it fascinates me. First, I'm fascinated by Ms. Otobo, and though I admit she's a tough sell, I'm willing to go out on a limb and defend her as a feminist, an imperfect one to be sure, and I will understand perfectly if a lot of people were to disagree with me. The most important thing for me is that she put everything on the line in challenging someone whom she clearly knew was in a far stronger position than her and who could crush her if he so desired. This is not incompatible with the probability that at the same time, Ms. Otobo was seeking fame and money, or at the very least, a much needed trigger for a music career that had remained largely aspirational. Second, I'm interested in sex as a dimension of the pastor's erotic power. The pastor and sex being, as I've argued elsewhere and in this forthcoming book, wedded in the Nigerian imagination. In this regard, I find it interesting that Ms. Otobo's attempt to put Pastor Sulaiman under a moral cloud, inciting pictures and all, failed. It was almost as if the Nigerian public was saying that there was nothing surprising in the sexual disclosures, that they had seen it before, and what else do you expect from a pastor? Third, having failed to make the pastor pay, whether financially or socially, Ms. Otobo was the one who eventually, and in a significant moment for pastoral power, had to retract her allegations against Pastor Suleiman. So, what went down? Mariana, please.
I am the lady behind the scandal of our father, Apostle Suleiman. Actually, I came to Nigeria with a very strong passion for my career, which is my music. And I fell into the wrong hands of some very strong and powerful politicians and some pastors who manipulated me in a very wrong way with the intention to fall the man of God. They lied to me, they made me to eat all sorts of stuff that are lies. But because of my desperation for my career, I succumbed to whatever they said. Actually, they promised me I would get my job, my career, whatever I wanted. So that was why I got into it. At the time, I didn't know what was going on. I just wanted to help myself. They paid me a lot of money. I just want to apologize. I want to apologize in the body of Christ.
That's
And
okay.
also, Mama,
Yeah, I don't think the video was playing clearly, but I think I hope you saw the point about the apology. Can you hear me? Mariana, can you hear me?
Yes,
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So it's a short video, but the whole point was to demonstrate how, Miss Otobo had to apologize, how she was degraded, So if it's a shame that it didn't come out clearly, but that's okay. So the question then is, what happened? So an April 22, 2017 interview granted by Mrs. Buki Otobo. So this is Miss Otobo's mom, to an online newspaper, gives us an indication of the kind of pressure Miss Otobo may have come under to retract her allegations, which is exactly what this, that video is all about. In the interview, Mrs. Otobo, the mom, who disclosed that she had gone to see Pastor Sulaiman to beg him, repeatedly distanced herself from her daughter's reported actions and asked for pardon from her. While we may reasonably surmise that Mrs. Otobo's action might have exerted moral pressure on Miss Otobo, it is the reason that Mrs. Otobo gave for going to beg Pastor Sulaiman that is interesting from the point of view of this lecture. So here is what she told the newspaper. So I told them, referring to her daughter's lawyers, that I want to go and beg the man of God myself to die down the matter. That's pidgin in Nigeria for, to let the matter go away. That is what every mother would do. I don't want to see my daughter destroyed. That is why I'm saying that all those lawyers should leave my daughter and bring her out of this matter. Well, we beg the man of God that she should forgive my daughter. When you call somebody a man of God, it can go to any length. So I don't want the man of God to go to any length to do any evil prayer, because when we heard of it that time, this pastors association praying all their sorts of things, I cannot sit down here watching my daughter like that. That is why I said I want to go to the source to beg that man. Nobody tortured me. I went alone. I entered vehicle from Sapele to Auchi. So from Mrs. Otobo's perspective, the merits of the case in which her daughter was involved did not matter as much as the personality she had taken on, a man of God, one with the capacity to spiritually hurt her daughter and who could go to any length if necessary. This goes to confirm the idea of the pastor as the one with the power of life and death, the one who determines who lives and who dies, and the one with the spiritual authority to either save a life in the salvation sense of it, or destroy it in the damnation sense of it. Possibly, this particular case received maximum media attention and dragged on for as long as it did because of what was at the center of it, sex. At the same time, it is not implausible that Ms. Otobo's foreign connection, the fact that she was Canada-based, a facility with social media, and the fact that she had a battery of lawyers led by popular Festus Keyamo, who in July 19 will be appointed Nigeria's Minister of State for Labor and Employment. The fact that she had all these people working for her probably kept the story on the front burner of public attention, sparing Ms. Otobo the fate of Miss Justice, in terms of anonymity. But anonymity or not, the pastor, once again, appears to have prevailed. So the third of the, of the encounters, this one involving, Miss Kemi Olunloyo and Pastor David Ibiyomi. Just like Miss Stephanie Otobo, whom I've just discussed, 55-year-old Miss Kemi Olunloyo is not many people's cup of tea. And the argument for seeing her as a feminist icon, even an unruly one, is not one that many will readily accept. Nevertheless, since I'm not interested in saints, I'm minded to accept Miss Olunloyo what and all, cognizant of the fact that she's often too inconsistent to take her own side in a quarrel. Not only that, she's prone to the occasional sweeping statement or unfounded claim. For instance, not only does she claim to be the most intelligent Nigerian woman alive and more intelligent than Einstein, something that unfortunately I was unable to verify before this lecture, she regularly boasts of having 3 first-class degrees. There's no public record of Miss Olunloyo having 1 first-class degree, let alone 3. Miss Olunloyo once claimed, that she worked for the American news network CNN for 20 years. It claimed that the organization had to come out, to put to rest. So, as recently as September 2019, she claimed on her Facebook page, and again with little by way of substantiation, to be in possession of a Doctor of Pharmacy degree, from the University of the Sciences in Philadelphia, United States. As at 17 April 2020, she still described herself on her Twitter page as Kemi Olunloyo, PhD. Now, because of statements and claims like this, many have been quick to dismiss her as a crank, or what is worse, a megalomaniac. My aim here is not to hold brief for Miss Olunloyo, but to use our encounter with Pastor David Ibiyomi, founder and general overseer of Salvation Ministries, Port Harcourt, to illustrate my overall argument about useless women in relation to pastoral power. If anything, it is the personal contradictions of Miss Olunloyo that make her a fascinating, model for me. Now, Miss Olunloyo was arrested by the police in March 2017 after she had circulated rumors regarding a train of alleged misconduct by Pastor Ibiyomi, including a reported amorous affair with Nollywood actor Iyabo Ojo, which Pastor Ibiyomi vehemently denied. For her troubles, Ms. Olunloyo was arrested and taken to Port Harcourt, where she was charged on 4 counts of publishing a defamatory and malicious story against Pastor Ibiyomi. Overall, Ms. Olunloyo will spend several months in custody before her release in January 2018, after Pastor Ibiyomi decided to drop all charges against her. Without prejudice to the specifics of the charges brought against Ms. Olunloyo, we have to admit that in retrospect, some of the facts pertaining to her trial seem rather curious. First is the decision to have a trial in Port Harcourt rather than in Ibadan, where she had lived at the time of her alleged offense. Second, given the nature of the alleged offense, the decision to have her remanded in detention in the Port Harcourt prison until a scheduled court hearing in March appears rather high-handed. Third, the fact disclosed during her March court appearance that she was being held at the pleasure of the Inspector General of Police seems totally out of proportion to her alleged offense. I bring up these facts because of what they seem to add up to, and here I'm just being speculative, which is that Ms. Olunloyo, having stepped on many powerful toes, and not just those of Pastor Ibiyomi, was most probably being scapegoated, and the decision to bring her down to Port Harcourt may have been a way to bring her under an informal pastoral jurisdiction. Pastor Ibiyomi cast a big shadow in Port Harcourt, the headquarters of his Salvation Ministries, and given what I've already established about pastoral power, it is reasonable to surmise that there, Pastor Ibiyomi would have been able to mobilize enough social capital to bring a useless woman to heel. The fact that in all of this, Ms. Olunloyo's pedigree as the scion of a distinguished political family, counted for very little, and could neither save her from jail nor public humiliation, brings home the point about the scale of pastoral influence. Having said that, Ms. Olunloyo's confession degradation was similar to Ms. Otobo's, although it was delivered in the mode of a testimony. So let's see if this plays. It's the last video, and hopefully this comes out clearer. Mariana, please.
One second, sorry.
Okay.
Ministry. Don't let the devil use you. That's my testimony. And I do want to clarify that I was not paid for this testimony. This testimony is going live on the internet right now. Pastor Abiyomi, somebody used me. The devil must leave. This is a church that I attended yesterday that actually prays for his pastor. I love that. I'm a member of this church now. I'm going to serve and worship God. I wrote on the internet this morning, is even in the Punch newspapers, I'm going to serve God and I'm going to serve God in this church. I came here in a police car and I'm not leaving. I'm going to fly the colors to conquer. And Pastor Biomi met with me yesterday in his office privately. He blessed me. He led me to Christ. I gave my life to Christ. I told him that the devil used Eve, the snake, after Eve was warned 2 times by God and by Adam. Somebody used me to genuinely destroy a real man of God. An 8-page letter that I'm going to give Pastor tonight. He'll see it. I posted the first page looking for investigation of something that didn't even happen, something that wasn't even there. Whoever it is, whether your staff, whether your friend, family, I hope God deals with you mercilessly. Thank you, everybody. I'm part of you now. And once again, I came out voluntarily. I was not paid. On the internet, it's viral right now. It's in the Punch, it's everywhere. I came here voluntarily on myself. Mommy,
this is the Lord's doing, His marvelous life. Stand to your feet and give God the glory.
Okay. Thank you, Mariana. Am I good? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So sorry for the poor quality, but I hope you're able to get the message. So one thing that stands out, from Ms. Olunloyo's recantation that is also directly relevant to the theme of this lecture is the reference to Eve having succumbed to the snake. I don't know if you caught that, as part of what she was saying, despite being warned by God and Adam. In invoking this as justification for her action, Ms. Olunloyo was, perhaps unbeknownst to her, tacitly empowering a common depiction of women as incapable of forming thoughts of their own, being easily brainwashed, prone to wild mood swings, and therefore undependable. In brief, useless. Once again, what had looked at the beginning like a plausible critique of pastoral malfeasance, admittedly by a deeply flawed social agent, ended with the campaigner appeasing the pastor, his church, and his wife. The man of God had won. So the final, the last, of the 4 encounters. This one is involving, Ms. Busola Dakolo and Pastor Fasto Igbo, also known as, the Gucci pastor. So in its overall flavor and not just because it involves sex, the unwanted type. This case is similar to the Otobo Sulaiman saga and is arguably of the deepest moment in sharpening our understanding of relations between contemporary Nigerian pastors and women, and relations between the same pastors and their congregations. Furthermore,
can I just, sorry to interrupt, but can I just say if we can do this one fairly quickly, because we're going to be running out of time for reactions
my understanding was that this will go until for another 40.
Yeah, well, I don't want to take too much time. No, it depends on how much you want time for thoughts and questions and answers.
Yeah, I have about, okay. I think I have about 7 minutes left. Is that okay?
Good. Let's not waste your time with my interruptions. So go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. So the encounter between Pastor Busola Dakula and Pastor Fato Ibo of the Abuja-based, Commonwealth of Zion Assembly has all the makings of an intra-celebrity face-off. Ms. Dakolo, who announced, in June 2019 that she had been raped twice by Pastor Fato Ibo when she was a 16-year-old youngster still living with her parents, is a celebrity photographer and popular media personality with a large Instagram following. Her husband, Timi Dakolo, is a popular singer who came into the limelight after emerging as the winner of the inaugural session of, Idols West Africa, in 2007. Pastor Fato Ibo, for his part, is one of Nigeria's most dashing pastors. Born in 1976, is decades younger than any of the Adeboye, Bakare, Udopo trinity that arguably occupies the apex of the Nigerian Pentecostal elite. It dresses the part as well, which is the reason why it's called, the Gucci pastor. Anyway, so the star power of the protagonists apart, two other key ingredients went into making this, a media spectacle like no other. One, and as many people were quick to point out, this was not the first time that allegations of illicit sex, had been leveled against, against Pastor Fato Ibo. And the second, Mrs. Dakolo's allegations came at a time when, courtesy of the Me Too movement, though originating in the United States, had caught the global imagination, a new kind of reckoning on sexual harassment and male power, seemed to be emerging. Anyway, in short order, and as a growing number of Nigerians took umbrage on social media at the perceived high-endedness of many pastors and men in positions of authority generally, the hashtags, church to say no to rape, pastor step down, provided, a unifying banner. So I'm going to skip over some of the other details, I'm going to provide about this case, because, you just told me about time. But one of the things I was going to emphasize, and which I think is critically important, is the role of the wife of, the pastor, in all of this. The importance of this woman standing firmly beside and defending the honor of their men, as virtuous men and as male heads of their respective congregations, cannot be underestimated. At the same time, we have a reminder of the increasing importance of the wife of the contemporary pastor, one who can be powerful in her own right, but whose authority is at the same time dependent on her being in good standing with her husband. So commonly referred to as mommy G.O. or mother in the Lord. She's technically a mother to the female members of the congregation and the model of what many Pentecostal churches are eager to portray about woman's subordination, to the man. So I'm going to, if people want to, want me to say more about that, I can come back to it. But I wanted to, finish on, two notes, talk about, what I'm calling, ceremonies of ritual degradation and how it applies to this woman, because I think it's an important part of it. And then I'll just quickly summarize. So there are two kinds of degradation, that I'm looking at. The first one is in-person degradation, which has to do with, for the first place, with the politics of publicity, as the affected church can record the event and post footage on its social media platforms. Second, since the whole point of the entire ceremony is to exonerate the man of God, it makes sense that the individual who has recklessly put him under a cloud and subjected him to such unwarranted duress will perform an atonement in the very presence of the congregation. In this regard, degradation ceremonies work to bolster the moral standing and overall prestige of the pastor, both before his congregation and the Nigerian public as a whole. As a form of absolution, a confession by the degraded individual is superior technically and morally to acquittal by a court of law. Third, the altar as the space of degradation is important because, given, as already discussed, the affective connection between pastors and their congregations, one can plausibly infer that an attack on the man of God is an attack on his congregation. And then, so I was going to talk about, I'll just skip that. And I was going to also talk about online degradation, which, unlike in-person degradation, takes full advantage of the anonymity that social media guarantees, and for that reason, can be particularly virulent. While within the space of the church, the audience is restricted to the intermittent bowing, with the declamation at any rate limited to the duration of the ritual. With respect to online degradation, the ritual is not temporarily bounded. It's not temporally bounded. Hence, there is greater scope for the congregation and otherwise dispersed enthusiasts of the pastor to take out their collective rage and visit their retribution upon the person who has dared to challenge the authority of the man of God and sully his anointing. So let me just quickly read the conclusion. So in the foregoing, I've used 4 examples of useless women in contrasting interactions with influential Pentecostal pastors to make 2 related arguments. The first is that the power and social influence of pastors notwithstanding, resistance to it can and does issue from the most unlikely social agents under the most unpredictable circumstances. The fact that these agents are often women is telling, given that despite some significant exceptions across the Nigerian society and within many Pentecostal churches, women continue to receive the short end of the stick. The women in the 4 examples boasted variable fronts of cultural capital, which shaped the evolution, although vitally not the outcome of their rebellions. Therefore, women's insurrections, while sociologically symbolic, carry no guarantee of success and are often undone by the actions and mobilizations of other women. Second, and finally, not only have the rebellions analyzed in this lecture failed to do any significant damage to the rampart of masculine pastoral power, I'm suggesting that the pastors may have emerged even stronger and on a surer social footing, indicating my point about the scale and tenacity of pastoral influence. Not all of that can be blamed exclusively on the woman. And my aim here is not necessarily to assign a value to what the woman did. If anything, I've sought to underscore the inherent worth of resistance led by women, many of whom carried significant social handicaps. I wanted to show that irrespective of those flaws, women's resistance provides an opportunity to juxtapose the antinomic character of women's agency with the vulnerabilities of an impregnable-seeming pastoral masculinity. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll clap for us all, although I think at this point, well, I want to sort of talk for a few minutes, raise a couple of issues perhaps, and then open the floor for questions. But I suppose we could have everybody join us even.
Yes, yeah, I think we should.
So I'm not quite sure. I assume Mariana knows what to do about that. But thank you for this really fascinating discussion of this kind of sexual power dynamics and the role of the pastor. And especially this talking about these degradation ceremonies. One question I had kind of throughout was we're talking about Pentecostalism and its obviously incredibly powerful role in Nigeria and its entanglement with politics. And then but I'm wondering in the talk about what you're in the discussion of what you're talking about now, whether there's something particular about Pentecostalism itself. Could it be any religious form, for example? And I guess I'm thinking, I think Ruth Marshall in some of her discussions of the church in Nigeria talked about certain things about the structure, giving rise to particular forms. So I just wonder what your thoughts are about that. Either Pentecostalism in particular, or certain things about Protestant churches, or is it something about sort of local cultural practices and history in Nigeria itself? That
thank you. It's a great question. I'm familiar with Ruth Marshall's work, of course. I think it's both sides of the ball. At the end of the day, there's something denominationally specific about Pentecostalism everywhere. Whether you're talking about Pentecostalism in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, the regions of the world where it's been increasingly as ascendant and dominant. So there's that. But there's also something very contextual in a Nigerian context, which is about some of the way in which Pentecostalism becomes imbricated with some cultural dynamics, and the way in which it is powered by the material context in which it is practiced, the kind of sensibilities and tendencies that it encourages. Those are some of the things that gives it the kind of the valence, the kind of specificity that it has, and that sort of conduces to the kind of specific relations between men and women that I'm trying to capture today.
But what is it about Pentecostalism itself?
I think it's a great thing. I think one thing for me is it's two things. One, it provides meaning where people seek it, right? So to be a Pentecostal is to have your life explained for you. It provides a theory of life. It gives an account not just of history and the present, it also accounts for the future. So there is this sense of epistemic safety, or that you feel on account of being a Pentecostal. The way I always think about it is to see it as constantly feeding off the limitations, the inadequacies, and the weaknesses of the state, right? So for a state that is unable to provide that structure of meaning, and for a civil society that is, radically degraded, people go to Pentecostal churches to fill in the gap, for all those other things that they can't find, in those other spaces and institutions. I think for me, that sort of, explains, the power, the enormous power that, that it has, and the control it has on the social imaginary.
But there's something about the power that's invested in the leader in particular, the pastor in particular, the understanding of what authority is within this.
Yes, and to the extent that
of authority, in other words,
and to the extent that authority, that leader, also drives that narrative. If somebody tells you, if so, I always throw this out to people, and I say, look, if you live in this particular context, what are you going to do? So the unemployment rate for university graduates in Nigeria, to the extent that you can take the statistics, seriously, is right around 60%, right? So you are guaranteed of not getting a job if you come out of a university, which is one of the things I was trying to say earlier, that so you have like 3 or 4 options for yourself. Do you join politics, either as a politician or as a member of an entourage? So that's one. Do you work on social media? They call it Yahoo boys, meaning do you take on a life of crime? Do you find a job in one of the very few places where jobs are still available? Do you travel, or do you become a pastor? If you look at all those options, pastoring is the most attractive within the Pentecostal context, because you don't need seed investment. It has all kinds of guarantees in terms of the way people are going to to relate to you. And by the way, you have access to women and girls, to women and money. It's a win-win, when you think about it. So those are some of the things driving, the movement towards Pentecostalism.
Right.
And, Pentecostal leaders are right in the middle of that. So if you look at people, like Oyedepo, like Adeboye, some of the leaders I've mentioned, the authority is sort of, the authority is strengthened by the claims that they can make to seniority, to class, and in many cases to education, right? So they become this impregnable force, impregnable cluster of authority, that is almost unchallengeable, which is why I find the challenge from these, 4 useless women all the more impressive, given the social odds that they faced, and given how almost from the get-go, it was almost certain that they were going to lose out.
I guess I was trying to imagine, I mean, these are all very interesting points. And I was just trying to imagine, for example, if in a Muslim context, whether a Muslim leader would accrue sort of authority to himself in the same, or be able to accrue authority to himself in the same ways.
It's a great question. The limitation that the Muslim leader has, and I do pity the Muslim leader, is that he can't appeal to miracles, right? Muslim leaders, don't do miracles. Pentecostal pastors can perform miracles. So, which is one of the reasons that, people are sort of, drawn to them. To be around a pastoral, a pastor is to be around this, this subject that is almost, sociological compelling, irradiates wealth, irradiates influence. Women are drawn to him. And most of all, he has the key to the very basic questions about your life that you're trying to answer. The Muslim leader has those things, minus the power to actually perform miracles, which is one of the reasons, an argument I've made in my other work, is one of the reasons why there's this element of theological jealousy between Muslims and Christians in Western Nigeria. And why, as I argue in my work, Islam is also becoming increasingly charismatic, because they are being left in the dust by just the sheer power and authority of Pentecostalism and Pentecostal leaders.
And of course, there's always the possibility of drawing on Sufism and sort of getting that charismatic authority through the Sufis. So anyway, it's an interesting thing to think about. And we should probably turn to some of our other questioners here. And Matthew, your hand was up first, maybe?
Sorry, yes, thank you. Thanks, Kathy, and thanks, Ebenezer, for that stimulating talk. I guess I want to push you a bit on the phrasing in terms of rebellion. Why you're talking about this in terms of rebellion, because it seemed to me the cases, I mean, I know you didn't have time to go into the details in each, and it sounds like you also had kind of different levels of background context on each, right? Maybe the first one being, it sounded like one where you maybe didn't have as much contextual information as some of the other ones, but I wasn't quite sure how you wanted to use the concept of rebellion and whether this was kind of descriptive or analytic. I mean, is this something that you see? I mean, to what extent? To what extent was this a sense of rebellion or protest or differentiation? Because I mean, rebellion kind of, it has very particular connotations and suggestions of kind of coming from within, right?
Yeah, I know.
Whereas, in the last in the last example, one of the things I found interesting were the things that Olunloyo was saying. I'm part of you now.
Yeah,
I came here voluntarily, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I wonder if you can talk a bit more about that. And then, sorry, just quickly a second question. I wonder if you can talk a bit more about questions of or issues of agency.
Okay.
And who is seen as working in a particular moment, right? Partly because in the first case of misjustice, was there a sense? I mean, there's certainly a sense from the position of the pastor that it was something maybe speaking through misjustice, right? Right. So, what is who is the agent operative in any given moment? And it seems to me that question is relevant to all of the cases, which kind of problematizes or at least expands the ways in which we think about kind of gender and agency and personhood here.
You could say a different thing was also speaking through all the pastors anyway. You see what I mean? Anyway, but these are two great questions. So let me try and why rebellion? For just, I think, two reasons. One is, I was trying to honor the agent, just honor the agency of those women, and speak to the fact that, what they did, especially in the context in which they did them, was not only brave, but, was also courageous. And these are things that, especially in the case of, Miss Busola Dakolo, for instance, you're looking at a situation where you're looking at a young, good-looking, well-liked pastor. You're putting a lot on the line, right? And it's rebellion for her because, remember, she's a member of that church, has been a member of church for a long time. And rumors had circulated about, the Gucci pastor's relationship with women, for a long time. Now, some of the specifics of the case, sort of buttress what I'm saying about rebellion. And I couldn't mention this because, I was running out of time. So Pastor Fato Yibo is known to, so his modus operandi is very simple. I cultivate a young member of the church that I like, and I buy them a first-class ticket, I take them to a London hotel. And then, within a few days, I soften them up, and then I do the act. And then for the very first time, he did exactly the same thing. They went to London, they were in a hotel room, and this woman refused, to submit, right? So that's exactly what I'm saying, that the rebellion was coming from within, to the extent that, you're talking about, a member of the church. And it's the same thing in the case of the young woman, Miss Justice. As far as I know, the parents, are members of that church, and what they did was to bring her for exorcism. So to that extent, she's a member of that church. And the question about agency, I think, is interesting, and I don't want to also diminish the importance of what this woman did, particularly Miss Justice. Remember, she's in the middle, in the center of an auditorium. She's on her knee in the ultimate posture of submission. Pastor Oyedepo is one of the most, powerful, theological / political figures in Nigeria. And she said at that moment, "I am not a witch," right? And I thought, that was really, interesting. She was giving the pastor something that the pastor was not ready to, and you could see that Pastor Bishop Oyedepo was flustered because she said, "What did you say?" The mere act of speaking back, the very fact that she spoke back, is what I find, powerful, in terms of symbolism. And you could see how the second person sort of drew inspiration from that. I don't know what she meant to do, the second, woman, but she also started by saying, "I'm not a witch." The normal way you play it to the script is to say, "I'm a witch, please help me, man of God, and all of that." So, and for Oyedepo, the thing to say is to say that woman, something has taken possession, of those girls, right? And I understand what you are saying there about, the different levels of agency. But you could say the same thing about Bishop Oyedepo, that it's the spirit that speaks, through him, and that is not fully, in possession of his agency. But we wouldn't say that, right? And I'm saying that if we wouldn't say that, we shouldn't deny Miss Justice, that the very power of that moment, and now she used it to flip the script, on a powerful man of God. Are you satisfied with my answer? I don't think so.
No, that's helpful. Yeah, I mean, no, but I'll let others
okay
to their questions. Thank you.
But thank you. I think they're excellent questions. Thanks.
So Walter, I think you're up next.
Okay, hey, thanks, Ebenezer.
Thank you.
So my question is maybe a little more nuts and bolts, but it's basically that if becoming a pastor is understood to be a career path for, comers who are on the up, why is there not more skepticism towards ecclesiastical exceptionality? And given with, I guess, the larger cultural context and the kind of failures of the state on the one hand, and the ability to explain the world within this failing context on the other, where does the end? Where does this end? Where do you speculate the actual change comes from? That's it.
Thank you. I think it's a fantastic question. I think, and this is one of the reasons why I was really interested in this, 4 instances. I think it comes from instances like this, this what I call insurrectionary moment. So you will see that I've concluded on a largely pessimistic note. So in each instance, I ended up by saying the man of God prevails. The man of God prevails. That is largely true. But you could see that there's a sense in which, taken together, all of these constitute part of the drip that over time serves to undermine the old, of pastoral authority on the public mind. So that's one answer to your question. But a different way to think about it is to say, until the sociological backdrop changes, right? Until, material desperation, problems with unemployment, all the things that leads to this profound quest for meaning, that the pastor then says, hold on, I've got the answer for you. I think until all those things are relatively fixed, we're going to continue to have, I don't see the end of the road. Now, let me then contradict what I've just said, by saying that even in a place like the United States, where, there's the physical infrastructure, is all the, material questions are being quote unquote answered. It does not necessarily mean, that people, know that pastoral authority, it may not be as prevalent, or on the scale of, what I'm describing in Nigeria, but it's still there, as we saw, with some of the things that have happened, in the US over the last 4 years. So I'm sort of trying to defend both sides of the ball, if which is more or less a way of saying, humbly, I really don't know, but I think that, until the long-term sociological drivers, are sort of either fixed or amended, I think, pastoral authority is going to be, we're going to have it at this depth and extent, for the foreseeable future.
Okay, and our next questioner, Anto. You're muted, I think.
All right. Ebenezer, just a comment and then a question.
Okay.
And the comment is, I really like your idea of ecclesiastical exception. I don't know, the Nazi era political theorist, Carl Schmitt.
Yeah, I actually quote him.
The idea of the state of exception is when the charismatic leader suspends the law and becomes the law. So I think it's in a way appropriate.
Yeah.
I guess what my point, the question is, degradation ceremonies can have contradictory consequences. Okay. They can fail. Probably the most famous failure in the last 30 years, or a little more than 30 years, maybe, the OJ trial.
Yeah.
Is an example of one. And it could be, if he got convicted, I think it still would have been a very contested one. The Chicago conspiracy trial is another one of the Chicago 8. Often degradation ceremonies are trying to change the public status, sometimes, of figures that have contradictory kind of personas in the public domain. And I would assume the fact that these ladies came forward initially shows changing gender roles or resistance. And I'm wondering about the pushback, especially by the ones that collapse, that completely apologize, say the devil is taking them over, especially on internet. I'm wondering, are there women or just people that really contest the sad part of that?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, great question. Thank you. I I think one of the things that, you know, if you are watching with the eyes of a Nigerian, if there's such a thing, you see the performative element of this, you know, and you see it as pure choreography, just theological theater. I mean, just once I started watching it, you know, I just knew that this had been previously arranged. So the whole ceremony has to take place for two reasons. One, the congregation has to be convinced, one, that the man of God is not the one who is lying. Two, that not only is the woman the one lying, but look, you can see with your eyes, she's here. This is not what you are reading in the newspaper. She's here to atone for her sins and all the terrible things, you know, that, you know, she's done against the man of God. But here's where I think, you know, your point is very interesting, that as soon as those people left, you know, the vicinity of those churches, they became their normal selves. They reasserted the initial claims, you know, they had pressed, right? But having done that, you know, the purpose has already been served, because the man of God can now say, look, she came here, you saw her, right? You know, she said she was not being forced. She said it was voluntary. She said she was being, you know, she had not been paid. Whatever else you hear outside, and you know, one of them actually did that. You know, whatever else you hear outside this space, don't pay any attention to it. The other part of it that I thought was really interesting is the role of the wives of, you know, remember in the instances I show you, the two instances on video, the man of God was not in sight. Yeah, we didn't see him, because it was very important, you know, for the church to say, you know, the man whose honor had been violated could not be present there, but it was the woman, the wife, who was there to receive officially the apology, not just to the man of God, but to the church that, you know, he pastors.
Thank you, Ebenezer.
Thank you, Bob.
Well, thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay, well, I want to thank you for a really stimulating talk and for great questions from our listeners. And I guess we'll just wrap it up there and look forward to seeing you next time.